Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Golden Zoom. I'm Marcus Janelle. I'm going to be hosting tonight. I'm the vice chairman of the Golden State Bonsai Federation. And our guest tonight, he actually was a presenter at the Golden State Federation Rendezvous Convention, and we had to have him back. He was just that good. So, Tom Fincel, our guest tonight, he's a longtime bonsai hobbyist from Eugene, Oregon. And he and his wife, Karen, they were friends with the owners of Telperian Farms up in Oregon, Lisa and Kirk. And under the tutelage, I guess, of Gary Wood, who was a plant physiologist at Telperian Farms, they were able to, using sacrificed branches, they were actually able to grow large trees, in 8 to 12 years. And anybody that remembers them at the conventions, they always brought these real big specimen pines and other trees. Now, during that time, I guess Tom came up with the idea, if you can grow a tree using sacrificed branches, why couldn't you do it using sacrificed roots? And so that's the basis of his presentation tonight. That's top-down repotting. So please, let's give a GSBF welcome to Tom Fincel. Tom.
Very good. Sounds good. Thank you, Marcus. Good evening to everybody. Welcome to the GSBF Golden Zoom presentation on top-down bonsai repotting, which is a technique for repotting containerized trees. My name is Tom Fincel. I'm a bonsai hobbyist from Eugene, Oregon. Been doing bonsai for 30 plus years now. I'm joined by my great friend Amin. Amin. Put your head over there. Yep. Who will provide technical support in case I screw up anything with the computer. My wife Karen is also sitting in the side wings here to try to keep me in line and to correct me with anything I misspeak about. Top down is a technique I've been working on for 10 or 12 years now. And it's a technique to take large or root-bound conifers in nursery containers into their first bonsai pot. Experts tell us that this transition is the riskiest repotting we will do with our trees. I hope to show you a way to take the risk out of this. I am hopeful everyone watching will learn something that they weren't aware of before tonight. And the first version of this presentation was given at the Portland Farm to Table Bonsai Seminar in May of 22 in Portland. And some of the pictures tonight are the same as that presentation, but I have many more pictures from the past 3 years on those same trees. So tonight's presentation will really be more complete and will give us better information. I encourage you to ask questions if you need clarification on anything, but some of your early questions should be answered by the 100 plus photos that I'll be showing in this process. It'll only take a little over an hour, so uh, don't check out early. There are a lot of pictures of a lot of trees and a lot of variations of this top-down technique. I've, experimented over this 10 years to see what works the best. So you'll see a lot of variations of things of doing this procedure. And I'm hopeful that by the end you'll understand the methods and benefits clearly of top-down. Okay, let's get started. What trees will benefit from this top-down technique? Mainly conifers in a containerized system. Any size container works as long as it is as deep as it is wide, and the deeper, the better. Typically, we'll be using these plastic nursery containers here that everybody's very familiar with. At Telperian, I got used to using 10-inch fabric grow bags on some of the trees too. That was one of the things that Telperian kind of pioneered, was the use of grow bags in the field to make these trees very easy to dig and very easy to transport and ship basically any time of the year. I typically don't do top down on young trees in your standard 1 gallon nursery container. the 12 or 15 or $20 tree in a 1 gallon can. Those trees are young and fast growing. And typically on those, I'll just pull them out of the container, bare root them completely, get all the nursery soil out, and then they go directly into good bonsai soil. Most of those are so strong growing that they make it. And if they don't, I haven't lost that much. But I especially like to do top down on any trees that I consider valuable and that really deserve to be repotted in the healthiest way possible. This Japanese red pine is a prime example. It was planted by Gary Wood, one of my senseis, in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, about 30 years ago from seed. Gary brought it to Telperian Farms in Oregon and planted it in this pot 15 to 20 years ago. Chris and Lisa Kirk brought me this tree this past summer. In August and September, it was starting to have some of the buds die, some of the little branches were starting to die. It was obvious that the roots were so packed in that little pot that the water was not getting into the center of it, and the tree just could not keep up with its water needs. So this tree really could be a poster child for top down. It's old, unique, valuable. It's got a long and interesting story to tell, and it's likely extremely root bound and in dire need of repotting. I'll be doing the top half bare root repotting in about a month on this tree. So this tree won't be included in the presentation tonight, but of course I'll be taking lots of pictures of the process, so maybe you'll see it sometime in the future. And this is a collected ponderosa pine. It's been in the same nursery container for 10 years. Um, as you can see from this tree, just like normal pines, strongest roots are always on the bottom. This thick mat here of circling roots is what, 3 inches thick, but that is just solid roots. There's no soil in there at all. I've been taught to repot this tree by cutting these roots off, throwing them away, and then taking the remainder top part of this tree, trimming it to a size that will fit in a bonsai pot, and then trimming another 3/4 or an inch off the sides and bottom to make room for a little new bonsai soil and putting it in that bonsai pot. I call this technique bottoms up in contrast to my technique, which I call top down. So what have we done by using the bottoms up technique? Number one, you've removed all the strongest roots on this tree. Besides that, then we put it in a smaller bonsai pot, and then the root mass still contains mostly nursery soil. So our newly repotted tree looks so great in its new nursery pot, its new bonsai pot. We take lots of pictures of it. Maybe we take it to our local club meeting and show it off. We're very proud of our new tree and in its new pot. We're very proud of our bonsai skills. But what have we really done? We've cut off the majority of its energy reserves, and now it's in a small container with nursery soil in the center. So this tree could live, but it won't regain its strength and energy levels for years. Doesn't grow much. It doesn't heal the big wounds on it. It doesn't backbud. Doesn't backbud at the base of branches. It just kind of sits there and lingers. And it takes many, many years for that to regain the strength that it had when it had this massive roots on it. So over the past 10 or so years, I've developed this technique I call top-down repotting to keep my trees growing strongly through the initial repotting process. And I'm able to correct many of the surface root defects I find. And I end up with a root mass that easily fits into a bonsai pot and contains 100% good bonsai soil and no nursery or field soil. This is what this presentation is about. Why do I call it top down? I could have called it the use of sacrifice roots to repot bonsai from a nursery container into a bonsai pot, but that's kind of awkward and it's just not as catchy as top down, so that's where the name came from. I've asked a lot of other people for years if they have known of anybody else that uses similar techniques. and I have never found one yet. Please let me know if you know somebody who has done this type of repotting before. I'd really love to compare notes with them. A little more background first. My wife Karen and I were lucky enough to become good friends with Chris and Lisa Kirk 20 plus years ago when we were all members of the Eugene Bonsai Society. Then Chris and Lisa purchased 100 acres of hilltop in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, southeast of Salem, Oregon, and called it Telperian Farms. With the help and guidance of their longtime friend Gary Wood, who is a nurseryman and plant physiologist from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, they pioneered the technique of growing pre-bonsai trees in the field in grow bags. Here's a group of Japanese black pines growing in their field in 2012. These black pines down the row are 5 feet apart. The ground is covered with landscape fabric to keep the weeds down and to conserve the moisture in the summertime. And each row of trees has drip irrigation running down it. Each tree has 2 emitters on it. They add fertilizer to the irrigation water, so these trees get fertilized continuously, which is one of the reasons they grow so big and so fast. Here's a typical Japanese black pine in the field. The movement is put in the trunk when these trees are seedlings, and then sacrifice leaders and sacrifice branches are allowed to grow. The sacrifice leaders are what generate all the energy and strength to grow the big fat trunks. And these leaders stay on generally 2 to 3 years on each tree. Then that leader's cut off and a new leader is brought up just a little higher than the previous one. And that develops taper in these trees. Here's a typical Scots pine, Telperian Scots pine in the field. Same movement in the bottom. The eventual bonsai will be this tall, and all of this is just sacrificed to grow that trunk fast. And lastly, here's a Japanese white pine in the field. This was the original trunk leader that was 12 to 15 foot tall. That was cut off. The second leader was brought up. This one's over 10 foot tall. All the branches that would be used for the eventual bonsai are conserved down here at the base. And you can see a lot of black pines in the background here. It looks like this is probably fall. I think all of these trees have been recently pruned. All you would leave on would be the apical shoot and maybe the top whorl. That's where most of the strength would come from. Here are Chris and Lisa Kirk at the Telperian table at one of the many conventions they vended at. They were regulars at the PNBCA conventions, as well as the GSBF annual conventions and the California Shohin conventions. They're wonderful people and were a great resource for the bonsai community. And here's Gary Wood, outstanding in his field. Well, really, it's Chris and Lisa's field. Gary is a great friend and carries more plant physiology knowledge in his little finger than I will learn in my lifetime. He is an accomplished potter and also famous in Oregon for his shrimp boils. Great guy. But on the night of September 7th, 2020, 80-mile-an-hour east winds coming down off the top of the Cascade Mountains started a fire at the top of the Santiam River, and this wildfire raced down the Santiam River Canyon and burned around 400,000 acres, destroyed about 1,000 homes, and took the lives of 5 people. Unfortunately, Telperian Farm was in the path of that wildfire, and it burned up all of the structures on the property. Chris and Lisa's home, a second home that was used by Roxy, one of their helpers, the bonsai workshop building that we had so many good times at, a huge barn, 2 very large greenhouses. Everything on the property burned up. Luckily, Chris and Lisa and Roxy and all of their pets made it out just in the nick of time. They probably left about 15 minutes before the fire went through. This all happened around midnight that night, so a lot of people were in bed already. So they were extremely fortunate to get out with their lives and get their pets out with their lives. Here's the upper field at Telperian after the fire. These are skeletons of Shimpaku junipers here. These were boulevard cypress, and this is a field of black pines over here. You can see that fire roared through so fast, it didn't necessarily kill every Douglas fir in the woods. There were patches of green trees, but most of Telperian Farm burned up. And this is a picture of the middle field. To the left, you see dead Scots pines right there. Further to the left were fields of black pines in this area, and mugo pines were in this area here. The greenhouses were kind of in this area and this area. There was this dirt road and kind of grassy area just to the east of this group of trees that were in nursery containers on landscape fabric. And I guess there wasn't enough fuel on the ground that the fire never took a hold in that group of trees. A couple around the edge were burned, but there was well over a couple hundred trees that were sitting in that group that survived the fire miraculously. Of course, the trees were without their water source at this time, and this was hot and dry September. So many friends of Telperian um, all chipped in and hauled all of those trees off the hill and got them to situations where they could be taken care of. So more of that, these very valuable trees were not lost. Chris and Lisa were so traumatized by the whole thing that they decided not to rebuild or replant and eventually sold the property. So Telperian Farms is no longer. And this is me in the upper pine field, standing next to the very first of the many Japanese black pines I purchased from the fields of Telperian Farms over the years. This picture was taken June of 2012. Every trip to Telperian was like a trip to the candy store. Hundreds upon hundreds of trees to look through, ever wondering if that next tree might be the special one. And it changed every year with every new year of growth on them. So, it was always a joy to go there, and it's such a beautiful location up there in the woods. And here's that black pine. It shows you how nice that they are to dig out of the field in these grow bags. That's a 10-inch fabric grow bag. And here it is just after digging it in the field. We came home that day with 4 black pines in the back of our Toyota bonsai hauler. Okay, that should be enough of the background. Let's get into top down and what it is. And before we get into the 100 or so pictures of the actual process, I'll try to give you a brief summary of what this process is going to show. One of the few slides that actually has writing on them. So if you need to take any notes, this is a good one. Three main benefits of top-down repotting. Number one, you're using sacrifice roots to maintain the tree's energy level. That's this part down here. We all use sacrifice branches for growing our trees faster. Why not use sacrifice roots as well? If sacrifice branches, powered by solar energy, are the engines of plant growth, then sacrifice roots are the rechargeable battery. It keeps our trees energy positive through this whole process. Number two, root positioning or correction. After the top half is bare rooted, you have your best look at the roots and may be able to reposition them when they're small enough to bend yet. So that's what these ties are up here. And then benefit number three is having your newly repotted tree in 100% bonsai soil in its new bonsai pot. You never have to worry about getting that old nursery soil or field soil out. Even simpler way to put this, top down gives us stronger growth, better roots, better soil. You start by removing the root mass from the container, then you bare root the top half and leave the bottom half untouched. Then you make your root corrections, put it back in a container, add new bonsai soil to the bare rooted top half. Then in 2 or 3 years, you remove it from the container saw the bottom half off, and pot up the top half into your bonsai pot. Now we'll do a detailed description of this process. Here are the two tables I do my bare rooting at. They are just chain link fence doors supported by 4 T-posts attached by some kind of electric fence wire probably. They were put in as temporary over 20 years ago and have worked so well, I've never changed them. These tables allow you to work at a comfortable height and to use a water hose for the bare rooting part. Tables are placed on the top of the steep bank here. This is a lower level steep bank and then the upper level. So the water and soil fall through the fence, the chain link fence, hit the board and go down over the front of the hill. So as you can see and you can guess, top-down repotting makes a pretty big mess. So anything you can do to keep yourself dry and clean and your shoes dry is worthwhile. And you definitely have to do this in an area where you can handle that mess. For very large trees, I can just move them to the edge of my driveway here with a tractor or hand truck. And then I just slide them up this scaffolding plank that I use for a ramp up to the table. This plank has hooks on the end that hook onto the pipes here, makes it very secure. If the wood is wet, these 60, 70-pound pots will slide up and down very easily, and you can save your back that way. Okay, here's the tree we're going to describe the process. This Japanese black pine that I'll show the details with. It's a relatively small tree in a 10-inch grow bag in a 3 or 4-gallon nursery container. I chose a smaller tree because I'm manipulating it a lot and it makes it easier to take pictures of. It is a tree I grew in my garden and is about 12 or 13 years old in this picture. And this picture was taken April of 22. So first you take the grow bag out of the nursery container, as you see here, and you do a horizontal cut through the bag fabric at about half height. Half would be more like this. This was about 60-40. But what I like to start with is about half height is where I make my cut, horizontal cut. These nursery bags that I used there had an impervious bottom in them, so I also cut out the bottom with a utility knife bottom here so that the roots could come through and take advantage of that inch of drainage soil that would be in the next nursery container. Let me back up 1, 2, excuse me. And then you take your utility knife and make a vertical cut through the top half and peel the top half off of that. And this is what you end up with. If you have a plastic nursery container, you do the same thing and not a grow bag. You just do your horizontal cut first, make a vertical cut, and take the top half of the nursery container off. I generally like to leave the bottom half of the grow bag or the bottom half of the nursery container on to protect this bottom layer from damage as you're tilting the tree and moving it and things. And at the end of the bare rooting process, then I'll typically pull the bottom of the bag off and the bottom of the nursery container off. Now starts the long and tedious process of bare rooting the top half. My favorite tools for this are the short stainless steel chopstick here. This is from American Bonsai. And my second favorite tool is this bent nose tweezers. Root hooks, root rakes tend to be a little bit too aggressive to do this kind of work. Yes, the chopstick and the tweezers are much slower, but you do less damage to the roots. So these are what I have found works best for that process. And you use help from a water stream at the hose. You just slowly and gradually remove all of the old soil from the top half of the root ball. So you start from the outside and just keep picking away. I'll have my hose up there, shooting water in there to help flush out the soil particles. After a while working on this one, I discovered I had planted the seedling on a plastic lid, with a plastic lid under the roots to try to get a flatter root spread. Some people use tiles and geodiscs and other things, but if I find something in there, I usually try to get that out. And as you can see, you do beat up the roots pretty significantly with this top-down process. All these lighter colors are where the bark on the root has been damaged, but I found that you never have to worry about that as soon as the tree gets growing or continues growing strongly. These roots apparently heal very quickly with this new growing season. So I've never had to worry about the root damage. Here's the process a little further along. I was able to remove the plastic lid, and you can see all the old soil on the tabletop here. But you can see, exactly where all the roots are positioned. This is sitting too high. Um, but see where all the circling roots are, crooked roots are. And if you need to take a break for a while, you can just cover the root mass with wet towels. It'll be fine for hours or even overnight as long as the towels stay wet. A little further into the process, I'm working on the interior of the top part by tilting the tree and washing water through with the top hand and chopsticking with the bottom hand. So I've got the end of the hose here stuck in the right side of the upper right side of the root mass, shooting the water through the root mass with the chopstick stuck in the bottom here to loosen up more soil particles. Everything is washing through onto the table, through the chain link fence, and over the hill.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yes,
Darlene Bond wants to know what time of year does this process take place?
absolutely the same time that you do your normal repotting. So this is a repotting procedure, and so it's done during your normal repotting season. Here in Oregon, most of it would be end of February, March, a little bit beginning of April. Okay. As far as the water spray, a higher pressure spray works better than a solid stream of water. So this is just an on-off, valve on the end of the hose. It's about halfway on. It shoots this out at pretty high velocity and produces a lot of bubbles. And I found the bubbles help bubble out the soil particles. So now I'm to the point where I think I've removed all of the old soil from the top half. On the smaller tree, that may have taken an hour and a half. On a very large and root bound tree, it may take me 4 hours or more to bare root the top half. And now one of the huge benefits of top-down repotting becomes apparent. Now you can see exactly what roots will be in your bonsai pot someday, and now is the time to make all of the root corrections you need. So like I say, you can see where these are sitting up too high, some are running at a diagonal. And it just lets you know what's going to be in that pot someday and what you're going to run into as far as size for your eventual pot. You can see all the way through the root mass, to the background white there. So pretty confident that this is fully bare rooted. Even more damage to the roots, as you can see, but this heals very quickly. It just has never seemed to be an issue. You prefer that all the surface roots emerge at the same level, so frequently you remove some smaller roots that are sitting up too high. If you get some roots coming out, maybe at the base up here, those will be removed. And roots that are sitting too high can also be tied down. I just use jute, Jute, twine, to tie down or move roots into better positions. The jute just decomposes in within a year or so, so you never have to worry about it cutting into the root like a wire would. You never have to worry about removing it. Most of the time I use the jute twine to tie one root to another root, but sometimes I'll make a hole in the top of the bag and tie through it. And of course, if you do that, then you have to leave the bottom of the bag and put it into your new nursery container. But you typically end up tying a smaller root that's crooked in a bad position to a more solid root that pulls that root in the correct direction. All of these roots that were coming out horizontal here, you can see have been tied down so that it forms a nice arc on the top of the surface roots there. This root's a little bit too large to move significantly, but at least I dropped it down about an inch, so I got it down deeper into the soil level.
Tom, we got another question.
Shoot. Yes.
Mark Britton wants to know, what do you do if you need to get under the trunk to remove hardwood?
Good question. Um, I never remove hardwood from underneath the trunk. I just accept that it's going to be there and choose my bonsai pot appropriately so it can fit there. Um, I can address further down the line in some pictures that do have some solid wood inside. And there would be a possibility that you could even shorten some of these solid chunks of wood to make room for bonsai soil. So that's not a bad question. As you can see, you take a finer root and tie it to a stronger root that holds it in the correct position. Um, Here's a root that was removed and cut paste put on the end. Here's those horizontal roots that came out like that. And now we're in a much better position.
So you're anchoring to pretty much anything that you can anchor it to inside the pot. Is that?
Yeah, so you take a small root that you want to move, and you know which direction of force you want to apply. So you look for a big root in the direction you want to apply the force, um, so that that can anchor the smaller root that you're using, that you're moving. Is that clear?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Here's kind of a top view to show the types of root moves I try to make. Sometimes I use spreaders of wine corks or a short piece of wood to separate two roots from each other. But I always use materials that will decompose with time. I never put anything around a root that could cut in or need to be removed in subsequent years. So after I'm satisfied with all my root corrections, I will then pot it up into a new nursery container. I want the new container to be an inch or so bigger diameter and maybe an inch or two taller to give those bottom roots a little new soil to grow into and thrive. So I'll take my new nursery container, which is a slightly larger diameter than what the old one was. I will put an inch or two of drainage layer in the bottom of that new nursery container, and then I will set the new uh, root mass into that new nursery container. And then I'll fill in along the edge of the lower half with either used bonsai soil, or if the fit is too tight that I'm afraid I'm going to get some used bonsai soil in the top half, I'll just use new bonsai soil for the whole thing, just because the amount of the volume isn't that great, because that bottom half is mainly just solid roots and soil anyway.
Couple more questions.
Yeah.
One of the questions, Mark Britton asks, what encourages new roots to grow from the top part of the root ball instead of the bottom portion of circling roots where most of the root tips are?
Mhm.
The damage, is there damage to the roots?
Mhm. I think that they just grow there because you've put good bonsai soil in there, and it's got appropriate water, air amounts in it, good fertilizer, and I think roots are happy to grow wherever they find a good environment to grow in. The lower half with the old roots and the old soil is compacted. So I'm kind of guessing that these trees are looking for a new place to put down new roots. And they seem to accept the top half very, very quickly.
Yeah, and Josh Renault wants to know, do you remove that bottom part of the bag after you've worked and exposed all the roots?
Normally I did, but with this one I had tied to it, so obviously I can't remove it if
Mhm.
if I used it for an anchor. But my druthers now are to remove the bottom of the bag, remove the bottom of the original nursery container, and just put it, in soil. So, but I've done it both ways, and both ways work. But I think getting the old container out of there is probably the best way to go.
Okay, great.
Good questions. So after the bottom half is well filled in chopsticks, I add my new bonsai soil to the top half. You know, whatever your bonsai soil mix is. For pines, I use 2/3 pumice, 1/3 akadama, and of course the standard bood mix, the 1/3 pumice, 1/3 lava cinders, and 1/3 akadama is what a lot of people like to use. And I'll put my new soil in there in layers, just like when you're repotting any tree. And I chop stick each layer in well to make sure I get rid of any air voids that are in there. And as I'm adding and chop sticking each layer, I try to be very careful not to disturb these ties on the roots that I've moved, because you want them to stay where they're at. So here's the tree at the end of this process. You step back, take a picture, think to yourself, great, I started out with the tree in a plastic pot, put several hard hours of work into it, and I've ended up with a tree that's still in a plastic pot. But seriously, you have just moved this tree miles ahead in its development. You have definitely set it up for success. Now you water the tree in well several times, just like with any repotting. Then you grow this tree just like any actively growing trees you have. This tree won't slow down with what you've done because it has that untouched and strongly growing bottom half, the sacrifice roots to keep it moving forward. With the strong growth, you can continue to develop the top part of the tree with pruning, grafting, wound healing, back budding. They just don't slow down. So here's that same black pine that was in the last picture. 2 years later, spring of 24. Good strong growth. The main sacrifices are off of it. Nice color. The wounds are healing well. Now it's ready for the separation, which is really the most fun part of this whole process. So you pull the tree out of the nursery container. Bottom, as you can see here, the bottom half of that old grow bag is still visible. Grow bag is cut with utility knife and removed, where you can just even leave it in on that location. Next, the root mass is placed on its side, and in this case, an old handsaw was used to saw the bottom half off. Really, though, a sawzall with a long pruning blade is typically my preferred tool for this task. It does a very good job. And this then leaves the top half remaining with its fine, healthy roots planted in proper bonsai soil. I mean, I think everybody can see how nice and tight that is, how full of fine roots that is, the nice shape of the surface roots. It's just all of those benefits. And then after the bottom half is cut off, you can easily see if there's any of the old field soil remaining in the center. No matter how hard a person tries to fully bare root that top half, it seems like there's always some tiny little remnant of field soil in there. But since you're cutting halfway through the root mass, anything that's left over becomes readily apparent at this point, because the old soil is always darker, the new soil is always lighter. So you just take your root cutters and shorten the larger roots that went down the bottom half, clean them up. Hopefully new roots will sprout from that. You take your stainless steel chopstick and dig out any of the remaining field soil so that now you can be 100% sure that you've gotten all the field soil or nursery soil out of that root mass. And then the remaining root mass is trimmed to easily fit into whatever desired bonsai pot you want to use. Um, Usual repotting and tree stabilization techniques are applied just like we're all used to doing, into this bonsai pot. Okay, so that was the first series anyway. Let me get a drink. Here's another medium-sized Japanese black pine that had been growing in a 12-inch grow bag in my garden. This top bare rooting was done in spring of 22. Here's the tree with all of the field soil removed from the top half. The roots, obviously, the entire bag had been removed in this case from the lower half. 12-inch grow bag, as I tried different size grow bags, and it turns out that that 10-inch grow bag that Telperian used was the perfect size to get the higher roots to fuse together and make a nicer Nabari in that 10 or 12 years of time frame. So that 10-inch size was very good if you're going to have a tree in there for 10 to 12 years. Here's the same tree after the root positions have been corrected with jute twine. Wine cork spreader up here. The usual smaller root tied to a larger root, side to side, pulling them down. Here's a tree after it'd been potted back up into the new nursery container. Notice the top of this nursery container had been lowered to achieve the optimal potting height. I always like to get the top of my nursery containers fairly even to the soil level on the tree so that I can see it well and get in there to work on it well. I'm sure a lot of people are used to cutting their nursery containers horizontally, lowering the top part down. These are sheet metal screws to reattach it. By reattaching that lip, you keep the pot nice and sturdy. It makes it easy to carry, but it also gives you the proper height. Very frequently, I'll use stakes screwed to the nursery containers to be my stabilization and support. Okay, this is one of the bigger ones. This is a large Telperian black pine that's still owned by Chris Kirk, and it's a fire survivor. So when I say it's a fire survivor, these are the ones that went through that conflagration and were brought down off the hill to somebody else's location to be taken care of. So these are the fire survivors. This is a before picture, and it's tilted up to get to let me determine what the desired potting angle is. I make a vertical on the side of the nursery container, and a perpendicular to that will be the new soil level. So that's where I'll want to do my top half bare rooting down to. Tree was brought outside to one of the potting benches, placed in its new desired angle, set it up on a piece of plywood with a cement block under it, bungee cord to hold it on there. But then when I go to do my top half bare rooting, I'll use this horizontal as the level I'm shooting for. Turned out that this tree was still in its grow bag from the field and had been planted in the nursery container with a little more field soil added. So it was quite common for Gary and Chris to dig a bag tree out of the field that was getting pretty close to maturity, and they were thinking about selling it, but they would just leave it in the bag and put it in a slightly larger nursery container, with just their typical field soil, which was a combination of pumice and potting soil. And then they'd put them on that landscape fabric in that one area on their place. Top, the grow bag top was removed. Bare rooting was done with usual stainless steel chopstick and the water hose. You can see remnants of two geodiscs that the seedling had been planted on, these fabric discs here, to get the roots more horizontal. On this tree, probably 60% of the top part was bare rooted. Probably part of that was due to the new horizontal, and part of it was due to not being much up higher here to grow any new roots on. Top half bare rooting complete. You can see that the surface roots on this tree were less than optimal, but it still let me see exactly what I'd be dealing with in the future. So, I knew that there were no roots off the right side here, so I could deal with that. I knew I needed to eventually address this surface root that would show a serpent root at the top of the pot. So eventually this root was cut about right there. But now I know what's in here. Um, and that question about solid wood, there's a lot of solid wood down in there, a long way down on this one. So here's the newly repotted pine in its new planting angle. And with the coarse upper roots that were present, I had planned on separating this in the spring of 25, which had been 3 years after doing the top down. But I didn't get to it last spring because I have too many trees. So I'll do it this spring. In the meantime, all the needed grafts have been placed and are growing strongly, and the two large trunk cuts are healing at a good pace. So the new tree will come out of the grafts placed here and all around in branches here. This is sacrifice, sacrifice. The end of this is sacrifice. There's about a 3-inch cut right here that's got a full callus on it, and there's about a 3-inch cut around the top that has a full callus around it. Here's that knob that was sticking up over the surface that was be eventually cut off. And here's another very large Telperian black pine that I had bought back in 2019. I did some preliminary work on it in the field for a year and had dug it in the spring of 2020, just 7 months before the fire, literally saving its life. Um, I frequently would leave the trees in the field in their grow bags for a year or two and do some of the preliminary work in the field, like cutting off some of the old sacrifice leader stubs and getting those things healing. Um, I found it was very advantageous to use the active growth in the ground to try to get those big wounds healing fast. And after I brought this tree home, I removed it from its grow bag and planted the whole thing in a large nursery container in field soil. So, this was one I didn't want to do top down on immediately. So a good second choice is to just put it in a large nursery container and use the same field soil that Telperian used. And here's that same tree on the bench outside in 22 during its top half bare rooting. You can see how some new finer roots have already developed in the past 2 years in the nursery container. So some of these finer roots up here have grown just in the 2 years that it was put in that bigger container. And this is the other side of the root ball after top half bare rooting. After this, it was potted into another large nursery container with new bonsai soil in the top half. We'll also get its separation this coming spring. Um, you can see all the way through the root mass here. A lot of these roots were self-pruned as they came through the fabric root bag. And here you have a very large chunk of basically solid wood.
Hey, Tom, somebody's
Yes,
asking, Diana Boydston is asking, what are the little potholes? Are they tie down points? I guess you had holes in the pot that you had put the last tree in.
this
Yes.
there.
See this?
Okay. Yeah, so all of these holes were just drill holes to get more oxygen into the nursery container. I think people frequently do that, just drill 1/4 inch holes or so all the way around the nursery container into the bottom also. Gets better drainage, gets more air into the root mass. This here, after I potted it, I probably knew that there was a void in this area of the pot, so I cut that part of the pot out, kind of tipped it on its side at a 45, added bonsai soil to fill that void, and then just put a patch over the nursery container attached with sheet metal screws to hold it in place. Interesting question. Hopefully that was what you were asking about.
Yep, I think you answered it.
Okay. Here's another large Telperian black pine bought in 2019, brought home in 2020, where it was debagged and planted into a large nursery container. This top half bare rooting was done spring of 22. Here's the same tree with the roots corrected with jute twine. One high root was removed completely right there. But your typical, everything's out of the top half, bottom half is untouched. Here's the other side of the same tree. It takes a lot of time on these big trees to get everything out of there. It takes a lot of patience, but I think it's fully worth all the effort you put into it. Here's that same tree potted back up into a nursery container, April of 22. PT 44, that means I have at least 44 black pines and got many more than that. This that same black pine on separation day, March of 25, so it'd been in there 3 years. Bottom half has been sawed off and discarded, and this picture shows cleaning out the very last remaining field soil from the top half. So you can see again that any of the remaining field soil is much darker, easily just picked out with the short chopsticks and bent nose tweezers. And then the larger root ends are shortened a little bit and trimmed up nice. Hopefully some of those root ends will sprout new rootlets. All that remains really is a beautiful solid root ball of fine roots in 100% bonsai soil. This is the essence of top-down repotting.
Hey,
Here's a
Tom.
side. Yeah,
Excuse me. Sorry, Tom.
yeah,
Evie
no
Morales
problem.
wants to know, what do you use for the drainage holes at the bottom of your pots?
So on a nursery container, I use quarter-inch hardware cloth screening over those to keep the soil in. And then if I do drill new holes into the bottom, I just take a power drill and drill quarter-inch holes all over the place, across the bottom, across the sides, whatever I think is necessary to get good drainage and get good air access to that root mass so that the roots can breathe well. Um, and then here's the same tree with a side view of the root mass. You can just see how tight that is in 3 years, tight, full of small roots, 100% bonsai soil. It's just beautiful to look at and see. Then you just pot it up using regular repotting techniques, nothing special. I drove bamboo stakes into the sides of the root mass, and then put the tie down wires around those stakes to anchor the tree in. Really an easy fit into this mica pot. In fact, the pot was a little bit too big, which is okay since I was still in the late development stage on this tree. It really wasn't into refinement yet. Next tree is another of the medium-sized black pines that I grew in a grow bag for 7 years. Some people have seen this tree. I left the bottom of the bag on to protect the roots in the bottom half while I was working on the top half. So the top half bare rooting is complete. Root repositioning has been done with the jute twine. Everything moved in the proper position of anything that I could correct. And here's the other side. Here again, I made a hole through the top of the root bag in the bottom half to pull down to. So this bottom half of the bag I had to leave on when I put it back in the new nursery container.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yes.
So it seems like when you're doing the bare rooting of the top half, is it better to keep something on the bottom, like the root bag, so that that soil there is not disturbed?
Yes, absolutely. I
Okay.
think I mentioned that earlier. It's definitely my preference now, having done it both ways. Definitely my preference to leave the bottom half of the root bag on or the bottom half of the nursery container on while you're doing the top half, because you are setting these trees up on edges and on sides and manipulating them a lot. So that um, bottom half of the nursery container provides a lot of protection to the bottom half of the root mass. So that's why I always try to do it now. Excellent question. So here's that same tree potted up into the nursery container, April of 22. Still has the sacrifice leader, few sacrifice branches at this time. And here's that same pine, March of 24. So this is just 2 years after it was top down, pulled out of the nursery container. And, just look how happy this root mass is. There's mycorrhiza all over the place, fine roots all over the place. Obviously, the bottom half of the grow bag is still on, and now it's ready to go for separation.
Hey, Tom, do you ever put these trees back in grow bags? Because I see you're putting them back in plastic pots. Do you ever, do the whole process and then just put it in a, slightly bigger grow bag?
No, the soft-sided grow bag out of the ground would be very difficult to work with. So after I do my top down, and it has to go back into a slightly larger container, I always go back into a slightly larger nursery container. Of course, that gives you the stability of getting your new soil in there nice and tight. Allows you to move these trees very easily without disturbing the new roots. And there's just an abundance of different size nursery containers, or you can even change the size of nursery containers to fit exactly what you need. Whereas a grow bag, you only have a few specific sizes. So I did this separation with the pruning blade on the Sawzall. Very fun. Like I say, you can even leave the bottom half on and just cut the whole thing off. Just look at that beautiful top half of the root ball, nice and tight after just 2 years of growth, full of fine roots, 100% bonsai soil. This picture shows all of those three top-down benefits. Sacrifice roots to keep the tree in a positive energy balance, root repositioning to give you optimal surface roots, and a fine root mass in 100% bonsai soil. Hard not to get excited about that. I'm sorry.
Uh, got a couple more questions.
Sure.
So ID wants to know what is the shortest and the longest amount of time you have used with this process, and is there an ideal amount of time?
Good question. So, how many years to wait from your top half bare rooting to your separation time? I think 2 to 3 years is optimal. On smaller to medium-sized trees, I try to 2 years is generally plenty good. Like this tree was here. On the really large trees in like 20-gallon nursery containers, I usually go 3 years on those. And, in actuality, a lot of these really big trees need a lot of uh, development work on yet. So if it stays in that second nursery container an extra year or two, no problem at all. I just use all that strong growth to heal those big wounds and do the big work that I'm still trying to accomplish on the top part of the tree.
Okay. Caroline wants to know when the trees are initially in the field in grow bags, is anything done to prevent gopher damage?
Um,
That's a tough one.
I don't think a gopher or a mole would eat through a grow bag. However, the gopher damage would come from two very big Rottweilers named Max and Abby, because the gophers in the field digging holes around the bonsai grow bags sometimes got in the way of these two large Rottweilers that were digging bomb craters all over the place. And so I suppose the dog digging could damage the root bag, but I think gophers would not penetrate the bag.
Got it. And now here's one. This is kind of a long one. So let me see
Okay.
here. If a thick root in the upper root flare zone needs to be removed for structural or aesthetic reasons, is only the visible top portion of that root cut away, leaving the lower portion embedded in the untouched bottom half of the root mass? Or should the entire root be followed down and removed, even though that would disturb the lower half?
So, how I have done it is I never remove any of the big roots in the top half when I'm doing my bare rooting. the initial bare rooting. I take pictures. I know where they're at. I know if I need to get rid of them, but I always leave them. I never remove them at that time because I really seriously don't want to slow down the growth of that tree. I want to keep all the energy going in that tree as much as I possibly can. So I leave them at that time. So when I do the separation, if there is a large chunk of wood in there that I want out of it, out of that root mass so that it doesn't take up space in my bonsai pot. Then after I do my separation and when the tree is laying on its side, I would take root cutters or knob cutters or whatever you need to do to go in there and remove that heavy root from the bottom up towards the tree. So by doing that, hopefully some roots will still sprout out of the bottom of that root cut surface, and you know where the void is and are able to fill that void with bonsai soil, good bonsai soil, when you're going to repot the tree into the bonsai pot.
So the point here is that is a sacrifice root. So
This
we're going to
this
leave it alone.
sacrifice this is sacrifice root here.
Yeah.
But the question, and I've got a tree that has a really big root, so I'll deal with it a little bit more there. But I think I know what he was asking for. If you do have something large in that upper half that you don't want in there anymore, should you take it out at bare rooting time or should you
Hmm.
take it out at separation time? And
Yeah.
you definitely take it out at separation time.
Got it.
Sacrifice roots. This is it. Sacrifice roots. It's so fun.
Now we're about, we're a little over an hour in, I was waiting for this question, and I'm sure you've heard this. Can this process be applied to other types of bonsais?
Yep, we're getting to that.
Yep. Okay.
Wow, we've used an hour already? Jeez.
See, we're having fun.
Okay, I hope so. I hope everybody's still with us.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. We're over, we're around 100 people, so it's good.
okay. Oh, excellent. So after trimming that root mass to size, it was repotted into this ceramic bonsai pot. I took this tree to the GSBF rendezvous in Santanello in October 25 of this past year and styled it at Melikeda's Tomodachi group. Got this really cool hat from that. But seriously, working with Mel's Tomodachi group is just so much fun. And anybody's welcome to join the group. It's a great fundraiser for GSBF. I thank Mel for all the work and hats he puts into the process. But it really is a fun thing to do down there. That evening, it was auctioned off at the Saturday banquet as a donation to GSBF. I'm not sure who got it, but I think that it still lives in California. And of course, the sacrifice top was out of it, and it was all styled when it was auctioned that night.
Another question, Diana
Yeah.
Boydston is asking, could the removed root be used for grafting into other places?
No, I don't see any application possibilities for that. These trees are all fairly mature trees, and any of the roots that are on there. Um, You don't have any top growth. So on a pine, if you wanted to graft roots onto the base of a pine, you would take a pine seedling, put a 90-degree angle into it, make a notch in the side of the tree here, uh, remove the bark from the bend in that seedling, attach it nice and deeply and solidly, let the top of the seedling grow up here, and let the root grow down in here and then eventually remove the top part. That technique is done with pines. I've tried it quite a few times. I've only had successes a couple of times. It's not anything is near as successful as adding root grafts on deciduous, I can tell you that. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and the roots are pretty much once you remove a root, that's it, it's done.
That's it. Yep.
Nothing grows from it. Okay.
You just throw it away. Yep. This is a really fun tree. This tree I call Boss Hog. It is literally has a 9-inch diameter at the base. Um, from here to here is 9 inches. It's the largest diameter of any Telperian black pine at the time I found it. And even better yet, the trunk in there is only 16 inches tall. So 16 inches tall with a 9-inch base. Um, and this picture was taken April of 22. Somebody's going to ask what these wires are. In the early days, when I'd bring a tree down from Telperian, frequently, I'd like to get some heat into the root mass to stimulate root growth. And so in the early years, I would take heating cables and run it through the soil in the nursery containers after I repotted them. I don't use that anymore, but these were in there. And of course, once you put them in there, you don't take them out until you do the bare rooting. Now I just use those 20-inch heat mats to set my trees on, but I use those extensively for trees that I repot or pot up for the first time. And here's Boss Hog in the field at Telperian. This was June 10th of 2017. There's this huge weed laying down behind the tree here, and this weed was growing out of here. So it was covering up this whole part of the tree. This tree had this very ugly 4-inch sacrifice branch growing out the side of it. So when you walk by this tree, all you saw was this big weed with this really weird 4-inch branch growing out the side. So I'm guessing that's the reason that nobody had saw it previously and purchased it. Um, I kind of pulled that weed to the side, saw what was in there, yanked the weed out, um, and my knees started shaking. And I looked all over in the tree, and there was no sold tags on it. And I found Chris immediately and said, "Is that tree for sale, really?" And he says, "Yep, to the right person." And so I put my tag on it and came down to Eugene eventually. And here's a picture taken at Telperion, August 21st of that 2017 at 10:25 in the morning. And in this picture, I was standing just 30 yards from Boss Hog in the field. I'm really sure that the total solar eclipse was a sign from the heavens that Telperion was a special place, which it truly was. And anybody that hasn't seen a total solar eclipse, it should be on their top 5 list of bucket list. It was truly incredible. Okay, back down to top down repotting. Here's Boss Hog on the repotting bench, April of 22. When I had dug him up from the field, March of 18, I found out that he'd been planted in that spot many years ago, still in his original nursery container. So instead of putting him in a grow bag, they just stuck the whole nursery container in the ground. When I got him home, I removed him from that nursery container with great difficulty, potted him up into an even larger nursery container to grow for a while. So here in 22, I just removed the top of his nursery pot to do his top half bare rooting. So I just cut the pot, removed that part, left the bottom half on to protect the bottom. And you never really know what you're going to find in these things. That's the one of the amazing things on this top down. Um, in this case, I had found a 4-inch horizontal root growing across where I thought was the front of this tree, 4-inch root, and then going down into the bottom half. So, you just look at that and say, what the heck am I going to do with that? Oh, just one quick note here. Down here below the area is a pond, and we'll be showing you that pond a little bit later. Close up of that root and a close-up of the bare rooting on this tree. So I made some notches with ball cutters into the bottom side of this root several places, and I stuck some rooting hormone and a little bit of sphagnum moss over it. Hopefully roots grew there. I took my Sawzall and cut halfway through the vertical part of this root so that I could get this tree used to the idea of eventually having this root fully cut. And so previously, then that whole mass would be put in the new nursery container. So here's Boss Hog on the garage floor on separation day, March of 25. Have been in there for 3 years. Tool of choice for this operation was the Sawzall with the long pruning blade. You can see I hadn't removed the bottom half of the nursery container. It's my druthers now to remove that before you put it into the new nursery container. But it works even if you don't. Surgery complete. You can see that there's very little field soil left in the cut surface, which is pretty incredible with those kind of roots. You can see here the little dark field soil in between a couple of the large roots, but really I'd done a pretty good job with the top half bare rooting. So I just cleaned out the rest of the field soil, shortened those big roots a little bit, and potted it up. Here's the sacrifice roots.
Question for you. When you
Yeah,
separate, I noticed you're not bare rooting the top half anymore. You're kind of leaving everything in place, correct?
absolutely. Um, you spent 2 or 3 years growing that beautiful mat of tight, fine surface roots in 100% bonsai soil. That's what you want together. That's what keeps this tree growing when you separate it and throw the bottom half away. But all of these fine roots in good soil is what keeps these trees growing so strongly. So you don't have to touch this. You've already done the bare rooting. So this is what you want. Leave it solid. You might have to start repotting it or removing some of the soil, about 8 or 10 years down the line, but not now. Let's see, I think I did not or forgot to say anything. Yeah, so here I'm potting them up into mica ova 19. Easy fit, root mass full of fine roots growing in 100% bonsai soil. And over those past 3 years, I've gotten the needed branches fully grafted. And the 4-inch cut on the back has a full callus and it's healing steadily. But you can see how easily it fits into this container. Here's a tree right after repotting, March of 25. And just a note, Um, again, I think it's best to wait 3 years for growth before you do the separation on these really large trees. 2 years is fine for the small and medium-sized trees. And here's the tree on the 20th of this past November. You can see how strong he continues to grow over the summer. I was able to remove more of the sacrifice branches, and I have every one of my grafts in here on the base of these branches ready to go to grow my new bonsai. So very quickly, and those years of having him in that second container were not wasted. I did lots of improvements on this tree with them growing so strongly. Okay, this Karen says, get going. This is the last of the pines I will show in this original series. This Telperian tree came down to Eugene post-fire. It was a nice large tree, but the trunk wasn't exceptional, so I planned on just selling it as it is in its nursery container. This was the soil level of the tree in the nursery container. Little inverse taper, reverse taper there. Trunk was pretty straight, had a couple of really big cuts on it. Not much movement to the trunk, so it was kind of an average black pine. It would be an okay tree, but this is probably one that was going to get sold. But that year the repotting season was very long, so I decided to do one more top-down repot, especially since I was taking pictures for that farm to table seminar. And so here's the black pine on the repotting bench during the top half bare rooting. Tree was sitting in its nursery container with the soil level quite high, and as I began to bare root the top, I was really pleasantly surprised to find that the nabari was widening as I continued to uncover it. So the further down I went, the wider and wider it got. Here's a close-up after the top half bare rooting was complete. It had an incredible 360-degree nabari that went on and on and on, and I had no idea it was in there. So I'm very happy that I decided to go ahead and do the top-down repotting on this tree. Same tree 3 years later, March of 25. Tree had just been removed from the nursery container. Obviously, very healthy. Lots of new grafts have been placed on it. Um, Lots of the big cuts had good calluses around them. You can see how healthy the roots are, all the mycorrhiza on the outside there. Here's the tree right after its separation with the sawzall. Small amount of remaining field soil been picked out, so you can see the darker old soil picked out of there. And then the large roots were shortened a little bit, cleaned up. Just look at that beautiful root ball again. Fine roots covered with mycorrhiza, nice and tight, which makes repotting easy. And the nabari is getting more and more exposed all the time. Look at how beautiful that is. So here it's getting potted into a mica Ova 17. Really over potted a lot. It wouldn't need to be in that big of a container. Easy fit, but the extra space will help keep this tree growing strongly because I do have a lot of top work to do on it yet.
Yeah, Tom, what is the your preference for tying these down after you separate them when you get them?
Whatever. I've used the bamboo stakes driven into the side of the root mass. It kind of depends I know what kind of roots are in there. So if it's solid wood, I'm not going to use that technique. I'll do the tie downs on both ends. A lot of times I'll do that four square method where you wrap a wire across the top of the root ball on all four sides. It's basically just all the standard techniques that we use for stabilizing our trees in our bonsai pots.
Okay.
Nothing special. And it's just so much easier because you've got that nice tight root mass that's easy to trim, and it just makes this repotting so much easier. And here's the tree right after repotting. And you can see that beautiful debari now. This was the old soil level, but we've got all of this beautiful debari exposed now, and there'll be more to expose in the future. Okay, last of the pines was gone. So this is a species other than black pines. This is a Shimpaku juniper that I had been growing in this 10-inch grow bag in a raised bed in my garden for 12 years. Just like with the pines, remove the top half of the grow bag. Carefully pick out all of the soil in the top half of the root ball. Again, using a steel chopstick, bent nose tweezers, and high pressure water from a hose. Here the soil's been removed, but the root positions have not been corrected yet. Here's the other side of the same tree. Do the same kind of root damage to the junipers too, but that all seems to heal very easily and never slows the trees down. Being a juniper, the roots are red. And this is the same tree potted up into a cut down nursery container in good bonsai soil in the top half. Spring of 22. Same juniper, spring of 24, ready for separation. See how strong the growth is. Sacrifices have been brought in even more. Now for the separation, cut off the bottom half with the sawzall. Large root cuts were cleaned up. Obviously the same thick mat of nice fine roots, just like the pines. So nice to work with. And here it is potted up into a mica round. Stabilization on a lot of these trees that go into micas are just wires tied from branches down to screws placed on the inside edge of the lip on the mica pots. But whatever way you need to keep these trees stable. Another Shimpaku in a grow bag, spring of 22. This is what the roots revealed after top half bare rooting. After root correction with jute twine, same type of thing. You're pulling a smaller root that needs moving to attaching it to a larger root that's pulling in the right direction. After repotting it, back into the cut down nursery container. 2 years later, spring of 24, separation was done. Side view of that same tree showing the beautiful tight root mass of fine roots in 100% bonsai soil. beautiful.
Now, you mentioned earlier you don't do this on younger trees, correct?
I don't do it on young trees in 1 gallon containers, just because those trees are growing so strongly. They're inexpensive. They're nothing that valuable. So just go ahead and do your bare rooting at that time. Get out all of the nursery soil, field soil, do your root work, do it all at one time, and then put it into 100% bonsai soil. I think that's what most of us do. Those trees in 1 gallon pots, and they're not very valuable trees. They're probably just not worth the time that it takes to bare root a tree, the time to pick out all of that old soil. And here's that last tree potted up into a round mica again. Question, what about deciduous? Does top-down repotting benefit them? I don't think top-down method is necessary for most deciduous, as they're much more tolerant of severe root reduction than conifers are. The ones that I have done were Telperian trees and root bags that were very root bound. I used top-down on them mainly because I wanted to see what the roots look like in the top half of the root ball and maybe make corrections at that time. The actual technique of top-down in deciduous is the same as with conifers. So here's a Japanese snowbell, Styrax japonica, in the field at Telperian. This was June of 2017. You can see the Scotch broom blooming there. That's June. This tree was loaded with beautiful blossoms, and the fragrance was just wonderful, wonderful. So it definitely sold itself. We dug it up from the field spring of 2018 and brought it down to Eugene. Here's a snowbell after removing it from the 10-inch grow bag, bare rooting the top half of the roots. Found a ceramic tile under the root base, so I broke it into pieces and removed them too. That was sitting about right in here. Then it was planted into a nursery container again in good bonsai soil. So the bottom half was undisturbed and top half was bare rooted, just like the pines.
I got a couple questions here. Somebody was asking, they're worried about the bottom of the root ball washing out, but I think you mentioned you leave something on the bottom so they don't wash out.
Yeah, and you could see even, I'd done quite a few that I had not left the bottom half covered. And those roots in these trees that have been in the ground or in these pots for 10 or 12 years, they were very tight and they really didn't break up or wash out with the hose water. But that said, I would definitely leave the bottom half of the container on while you're doing the top half bare rooting just to protect the bottom half. That's the way I try to do them all nowadays. But if you've got a really tight root mass, it really doesn't harm the process by having it uncovered.
Okay. And would you use this top-down approach on a more refined Japanese black pine that's been worked on for, you say, 15 years?
So this is for trees that are basically in nursery containers, um, in either nursery soil or field soil, and you're transitioning them to a bonsai pot. So I think that the trees you're talking about are already in a bonsai pot and are already in 100% bonsai soil. So no, top down would not apply to them and it would be of no benefit to them. Separation date, March of 21. Cut off the bottom half with the Sawzall, then cleaned out the little area of remaining field soil from the bottom, then shortened the big root cuts a little. There's your sacrifice roots. And here's a tree potted up into a mica round. You can see that I've been developing the top over the past 3 years, aided by the continued strength of the tree. Lots of branch work, the big cuts were healing, and new buds, new branches are being added. So by now, you've learned and hopefully you've learned and understood the mechanics of top-down repotting and can see the benefits this technique provides. Now the remaining slides are of various trees showing more applications of top-down. I'll run through them pretty fast since we're running long. I think most all of them are pine trees, which I have found are the species that benefit most from top-down technique. This is another large post-fire Telperian black pine. It has unique features that earned it the name giraffolent. The long giraffe neck with the giraffe head with the ears and giraffe horns with, of course, the elephant trunk. So that's how it got its name, giraffolent. Here he is ready for his separation day, March of 2024. So he's already had his top half bare rooting done 2 years previous. Here he is laying on his side in the garage, supporting the trunk from the ceiling. Get it, trunk? Then I made the separation cut at a bit of a diagonal to account for my corrected planting angle. Here's the one that had the big chunk of wood. So when I saw the cut surface, I realized why this was so difficult to cut through. Um, the main roots had formed into a solid mass of wood. But, it was hard to cut through, but there was still this super nice mat of nice fine roots all the way around it. And so I really wasn't worried about this tree not having enough roots to keep it growing strongly. At this point, I did not chew away at the bottom of this. I think that would be a possibility if you would take a knob cutters or a die grinder or something and grind out all of this wood up towards the base of the tree, you would make some more room for bonsai soil in your bonsai pot. So I don't think that would be a bad idea. I don't think it would damage the health of that tree since it's really not relying on the wood in this part of the root anyway. And I hope that answers those previous questions. Went into a mic around with a stake to support the top heavy trunk for a year. Grew very strongly the following summer. Here again, beautiful, fine, tight, massive roots.
I have a deciduous question here from Susan Corbin. How long did you wait before pruning the top of the deciduous tree you used the top-down technique on?
I was working on the top just as I do on all my pines, straight on through the whole process. Uh, that's what I said was one of the huge benefits of top down is that these trees don't slow down by using this technique. They keep
Mhm.
growing strongly. So while that tree is sitting in its second nursery container with its new top down surface roots, I'm working on the top part. I'm grafting, I'm doing big cuts, I'm grafting new branches on that deciduous. I was doing a lot of branch work. So you just continue to do the work on the top part of the tree that you need to do. You don't have to stop or wait anywhere in this process.
Yeah, and you've been mentioning the fact that you're putting a lot of grafts on your pines because they have a lot of sacrificed branches, right? You want to get that growth closer to the trunk.
Absolutely. That was one of the problems with Telperian big pines. They grew very rapidly, had lots of big branches, and a lot of those big branches developed thick bark already at the base. So those branches don't bud back at that location. So that only leaves a person with the option of grafting new foliage at the base of those large branches, which I routinely did on basically all of those trees. And then you grow your new branch from those grafts that you put on.
Now, when you graft, you're not putting your tree in a greenhouse or anything. Are you just wrapping the scion and doing the graft?
Yep. The technique that where you use the buddy tape and the that wax film
Yeah. Mhm.
to cover the graft, and most of them are what I call just bud grafts or cleft grafts, whatever people call them, where you're just doing the bud into the base of that branch.
Hmm.
Quick procedure, easy to take care of. You don't have a bag around it that you have to keep filling with water. You don't have to worry about too much sun usually. So no, lots of grafting. I've done some approach grafts too. Same way. Whatever you need to do to get new foliage into the center part of those trees is what you need to do. Another large Telperian Scots pine this time. It was bare rooted, top bare rooted in the spring of 2020. Here it is on its separation day, April of 22, with Karen holding the top of the tree. The cut was made with the Sawzall. Sacrificed roots right here. Tree was moved into the garage. Top was suspended from the ceiling in a horizontal position. You know, when you're doing most of your things by yourself, you always rig up some way to be your extra arm and to hold trees where they need to be. Um, as usual, if there's any field soil left in the top half from the top half bare rooting, it's really easy to see at separation time. So this really big tree had a little bit of field soil right in the very center of it, but very easy to pick out with the chopstick or bent nose tweezers, very easy to visualize. And now here's the cut surface with the remaining field soil removed and the larger roots cut back half an inch to a full inch in length. That's all the cuts there. It's going to leave a nice smooth cut so that hopefully they will sprout new roots in the future. And here you get the nice tight mass of fine roots. And this was produced in 2 years on this tree. This is at least a 6-inch base on this tree. So this mass of fine roots were grown in only 2 years. Normally I would leave a tree of that size go 3 years. Easily potted up into a mica ova 19, now only containing fine root growth in 100% bonsai soil. Another large Telperian black pine tipped over in the field. Either the dogs ran over it or the gator ran over it or the elk ran over it. But the exposed roots eventually fused and formed this huge root ball here. It had been top half bare rooted 2 years earlier and potted up into this short nursery container. I also added the fence of 1/4-inch hardware cloth around here to build the soil surface a little higher in this area. So this was separation day, April of 22. I removed the tree from the nursery container and this is what the roots look like. I kind of combed out the bottom half to see what was in there since this was one of my first top-down efforts. Top half was tight, and I was glad that I had added that hardware cloth because I really needed that extra height of bonsai soil there to grow the top part to get enough thickness. And here was the surprise. You know, when I did the top down, I knew that there was a lot of solid wood in there. So when I went to do the separation on this puppy, took him outside and I first went at him with the Sawzall and the pruning blades. They cut for a while, but eventually they'd start smoking and gum up and just wouldn't go very deep. So eventually I just grabbed the chainsaw and did the separation with the chainsaw. Really was very satisfying. You know, all it cost me was a chain resharpening, and it cut through very easily. So, you know, if you're ever forced to do something like that, the chainsaw does work. My only regret is that I didn't video the process when I did it. When I saw how much of this was solid wood, I was a bit nervous, wondering if there were enough roots remaining to keep the tree healthy. But as you see, we had a good layer of nice fine roots around it. So this was one of the early ones, so I really didn't know if this tree would slow down a little bit or not. So we potted them up into over 19 mica. And this tree continued to grow just as strong that following summer. I did multiple grafts on the bases of these branches. Just for the heck of it, I hosed off the bottom half to see what was in there. Most of this root mass was one large burl. Just incredible. Here's some of the cuts from the pruning, from the Sawzall and the pruning blades that went in a little bit, but they just obviously was too much to cut through with the Sawzall. Here comes the pawn shot. So there you have it. if you have a large, valuable conifer in a nursery container and you want to get it into a bonsai pot in the healthiest way possible, take the leap. Give top-down repotting a try. I had been out repotting on this day and I saw this deer on the island in the pond, and I could see she was nervous about swimming across the open water. And so I grabbed the camera and the tripod and put it on Zoom. And I was really lucky to catch her just as she tried to leap across the open water. So, this is a picture from the beginning of my presentation. It is a picture of the first black pine I had purchased and dug from the field at Telperian. That was June 10th of 2012. Here's the same tree after a repotting this past March of 25, just to show you a Telperian field-grown black pine that is actually close to being exhibited. Thank you, GSBF, for letting me share this with you. I hope you got some information from this presentation that will help you grow better bonsai. Now I'd be happy to answer any further questions you have regarding this top-down technique.
Yeah, awesome. Let me see here. My question for you is, do you sell any trees?
Um, I have sold quite a few, but all of those post-fire trees, most of them are gone now. I still have a few, so I probably have four, five, six left for sale. I basically make sure that they all get top down, are in 100% bonsai soil, and are all fully grafted at the bases of the branches because those are difficult for some people to do. So. When those are done and these trees are too big for me to carry anymore in my advanced age, then they get sold.
And just the comments there, everybody is telling you how great the presentation was, and thank you for sharing all the information. So very informative. Just thank yous, people clapping. I think you're getting a standing ovation now. So
Excellent, excellent. I'm happy to hear that. We've had a fun time here tonight. If you know anybody who's doing this kind of technique, let me know. And if you have further questions, let me know. Um, this was the original top-down presentation. I'm working now with trees in Anderson containers, which are very common, and working with newly collected Yamadori now too. But that's probably a whole new show. But those techniques sometimes can work very good on those kind of trees too.